Greetings, greetings, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to So You Want to Be a Supervisor, Part 1. I'm so excited to have you here with us this evening. I'm so excited to jump into these different topics. So, for the next couple of weeks, we're just going to be exploring some topics that are relevant to people who want to lead, who want to be supervisors, or who want to be managers, who want to be promoted within the company that you work for. And the reason why this is so special and important to me is because, as someone who was in management, I made a lot of mistakes. I learned a lot, and just wanted to make sure that we share with everyone these techniques, these tricks, these tools, this information, because we want everybody to be well aware of what's going on. And so we are jumping into tonight's topic, leadership and low self esteem. So I want to encourage you to get your pens, your notebooks, get yourself ready to take some notes. Also, to ask questions in our next session next week. I will be answering some questions that come from today's live. So, again, excited to be here with you, excited to share. And so, let's go ahead and jump in to our message this evening. So, I want to just give you a little bit of introduction on myself, and just let you know who I am and what I'm about. I have about 15 years of management experience. I have close to 10 years of professional training experience. Many of you may know my background is elementary education. But after working in that field for a few years, I realized that the parents of the children really needed dedicated time and attention. And so my interest shifted from children to adults, and finding that people just need coached and trained on a variety of topics. We all do. We all need coaching. We all need training to get better in our craft or just in our life. I do have a master's degree in education, but I also have years of mistakes and experiences that have made me wiser and stronger. So, again, I am your trainer this evening. My name is Trishonda Ward, and I count it a privilege to have you with me tonight as we go through this topic on leadership and low self esteem. And so, the first thing I want us to look at is our picture here. Leadership and low self esteem is very similar to oil and water. And as you know, oil and water simply don't mix well. As you can see, the oil is surfacing there to the top of the water, or it's trying to sink, but it never quite mixes. And that's what happens when you have a situation where you have a leader who is wrestling with, dealing with, struggling with low self esteem. I don't say this in a bragging manner or in a accusatory manner. I just want to be clear. There's no shade being thrown here this evening, because I myself have struggled in my life with this issue of low self esteem. There were some things that happened in my childhood, like most of us, that lended itself toward me not perceiving or having the proper perception of myself. And so that's why I want to share these tools with you so that we understand how low self esteem can affect our ability to be a good, great, or excellent leader. And so, what is self esteem? I think it's important that we first begin with the definition. So, if you go to dictionary.com, if you go to Webster's Dictionary, self esteem is defined as confidence in one's own worth or abilities or self respect. That is how you define self-esteem: confidence in one's own worth, abilities, or self-respect. So then if we say that self-esteem is confidence and self-respect, then we can deduce that low self-esteem is a lack of confidence and a lack of self-respect as it pertains to your worth or to your abilities. So, what are some characteristics of low self-esteem itself? People who struggle with self-worth, confidence in their abilities, often lack confidence in the ability to make decisions. And as you know, as a leader, one of the major roles that you will play is that you will be making decisions regularly throughout your week and throughout your day. The second one is feeling powerless or a lack of control. So, individuals who struggle with their self esteem often feel like they don't have control, they don't have the power that they need. They're always trying to play catch up in this area. Comparison and jealousy. When people don't have a good self worth, they find themselves in comparison and often being jealous of others. And this is especially critical as we find ourselves in a social media age where people are showing you the best of themselves. You know, it used to be we would take pictures and share them with our families and friends. But now, as we're sharing our pictures and our posts on social media, we are using filters and we are making ourselves look as beautiful and as wonderful as possible. But that's not often the real us. And so people who struggle with self esteem find themselves dealing with comparison and jealousy. The next characteristic of low self esteem is the inability to accept positive feedback. Positive feedback. I'm not talking about negative criticism, I'm talking about positive feedback. People who have low self esteem have a hard time accepting feedback that is meant to help them. People who struggle with low self esteem also deal with people pleasing, trying to please everyone or trying to please a certain or select group of individuals. There's also a fear of failure. And I'm not talking about just a normal, healthy fear. I'm talking about a gripping fear that what I do, what I say, what risks I take are automatically going to fail. And then there is passive aggressive behavior. Passive aggressive behavior, you'll find people who struggle with this are often very, very quiet, very, very aloof. And then one day it seems like they just snap out. And that is because they are holding on to things instead of dealing with things in a healthy and progressive manner. So these are some characteristics that you will see when you find somebody who struggles with low self esteem. So, as we think about low self esteem, like any other behavior, there is a root. Excuse me. And the root of low self esteem is trauma. Trauma, such as living with undue pressure to perform, parents or caregivers or guardians who compare children to one another, and that child who's being compared is being told that I wish you were like your sister or I wish you were like your brother. Children who have not been affirmed properly by one or both parents. Children like myself who have been bullied throughout school. Children who have just experienced things in their life that have made them feel less than. And because children and even some adults don't have the tools to always understand how to make themselves or to feel better or have a better perspective of themselves, then they find themselves in all those behaviors that we referenced in the previous slide: comparison, jealousy, needing to have power, needing to have control. And so trauma is the root of low self esteem. I had a professor who put it this way: people who suffer from low self esteem are like a flower that never had the opportunity to blossom. And so, because they never blossom, they go through life being a bud and they never get the opportunity to see themselves in full bloom. That's what it's like when you're carrying around, living with, surviving with low self esteem. And so, how does low self esteem in a leader impact staff? So now you go from just being an individual with low self esteem, and now you are overseeing a group or groups of individuals in the workplace. And so your low self esteem as a leader, because of the behaviors, is creating the following in your staff. It's creating stress, anxiety. There's a level of mistrust, declining morale. People don't want to be at work, are suffering because they have to come to work. Low productivity because people are wrapped up in their emotions. Overall, a very toxic work culture. Toxic work cultures are categorized by people that are feeling under control, feeling afraid to express their opinions, feeling like they can't be free to be themselves. They're not free to use their gifts and their talents. And then, of course, ultimately turnover, because some people are just not going to stay in a situation where they feel threatened, the stress, the anxiety, the mistrust, they're not going to stay there. And so, a leader who exhibits low self esteem characteristics, that person is causing indirectly or directly all of these things in the workplace. This particular chart that I'm sharing with you now is some 2019 data on why people have left their jobs or left their places of work. The little slices of pie. So the yellow slice of pie might be, I moved out of town, and so that's why I'm leaving my job. The blue slice of pie might be, I decided I'm going to quit my job and be a full-time mom or a full-time dad. The pink slice of pie, we have a lot of people in 2019 and in 2020 actually who launched their businesses because traditional businesses, brick and mortar buildings were closing down. And so they decided to launch something different, to do something new. But what I want to point your attention to is this 54 to 56% slice of the pie. So the blue slice of the pie, 54 to 56% of individuals in 2019 left their job because of a manager, because of a direct supervisor. I want you to think about that for a minute. I want you to reflect on that. This is huge. That 54 to 56% of individuals left their job in 2019 because of a supervisor. No other factors, but they just couldn't handle a supervisor. And I want to submit to you that the supervisors that they were under were people who were exercising power and control, narcissistic techniques, being very demanding, not being very concerned about the employee. And as a result, people decided, I don't want to live like this anymore. And so they've left their jobs. And so, how do we deal with this issue? Because this is a very real issue. It's a very prevalent issue. It's a very prominent issue. How do we deal with this issue? The best way to avoid becoming a leader with low self-esteem is to discover your why. So if you're saying, Trishonda, I want to be a good leader, I want to be an effective leader, I want to be a leader who doesn't exhibit low self-esteem as it pertains to my relationships with my staff, How do I do that? You have to discover your why. Why is it that you want to be in leadership? What is it that you hope to gain? What is it that you hope to achieve? And these are all questions that you have to ask yourself. You have to be honest with yourself about. Because if you're not honest, you won't be an effective leader. And so here's a reflection exercise. I want you to take about 3 minutes and I want you to do this particular exercise. I want you to think about the answers to these questions. The first question is, or the first statement that you need to respond to is, I want to be a leader because. So write that down and then take a minute. I'm going to give you some time to reflect on these. The second one is, if I were the leader, I would, and then you fill in the blank. The next one is, if I were the leader, I would not, fill in the blank. And then the first thing I'm going to do after I get the job is, meaning after you become a leader, I'm going to do this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time and I want you to write down your answers to these questions. So go ahead and take a moment and answer these questions very honestly. Take a moment, write down your answers to these questions. I hope you got your pen busy there. Because these questions are really going to help us to determine, help us to see your why, your reason for wanting to be a supervisor. And you have to know your why. If you don't know your why, you'll be wanting to lead for all of the wrong reasons. And so knowing your why is critical. It is important. All right. So let's move on. Let's look at some reasons that, common reasons that people, want to be a leader. So one of the common reasons that people want to be a leader, number one, is they want to be an influencer. I want to have influence over large groups of people. I get to tell people what to do. Finally, especially if you've been in the position of always being told what to do, I get to tell people what to do. It's my turn for success. I finally get to prove blank wrong. So you fill in the blank, whoever that is. It could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be a teacher who told you you wouldn't make it or you wouldn't amount to anything. And so people say, oh, I want to be a leader because I finally get to prove that person wrong. Hey, I want the corner office with the view. I want the nice office. I'm tired of sitting in a cramped cubicle. Or here's another common one. I know so much more than my bosses. They don't know anything. This is why I want to be the leader. Another reason that is passed down from a generational standpoint is my family has always been in the lead. Therefore, I want to be in the lead. So these are some common reasons that people who say, oh, I want to be a leader, that this is why. But here are some better reasons to want to be a leader. I want to grow with my team. I want the company to do well. I want to have a positive impact by being a role model. These are all great reasons to become a leader. If your reason, I want you to write this down, take this note. If my reason for wanting to become a leader is purely selfish, then I could be setting myself up for failure. If I want to become a leader to prove somebody wrong, if I want to become a leader to be an influencer, if I want to become a leader just so that I can, start balling and shot calling, as though money were the be all and end all. If those are my reasons for wanting to lead and not wanting to make a difference, then I could be setting myself up for failure. And the reason why I said could be is because there are some people who go into leadership with the expectation of the money, with the expectation of being popular, and they get all of those things and they have all the success that's associated with it. So for them, it's great. But what they're missing is the opportunity to help someone else, the opportunity to make a difference, the opportunity to make a change. So if your reasons for wanting to lead are purely selfish, what happens is you also begin to focus on yourself and you take your focus off of your team. I'm going to repeat that. If your reason for wanting to be a leader is purely selfish and you take your focus completely on yourself, you're also taking focus off of your team at the same time. So, to truly know your why do I want to lead? You have to be brutally honest with yourself. You have to say to yourself, what am I getting out of this? Am I doing this to prove somebody wrong who said I wouldn't be anything? Am I trying to be in leadership to feel more powerful? Am I trying to be in leadership to have more of an influence? Am I trying to be in leadership so people will take me seriously? If these are your reasons, it's very, very likely that your need to lead is tied to low self-esteem. I'll say that again. If these are your reasons, it is very likely that your need to lead is tied to low self-esteem and not necessarily because you value making a difference. Here are some other reasons why leadership and low self-esteem don't mix. Number one, leaders with low self-esteem often end up with compromised physical health. So this is something that people don't take into consideration. When you're a leader with low self-esteem, you are very tempted to micromanage. You are very tempted to control. You are very tempted to be in everything. You have a lack of trust for those that you lead. So then what happens is now your physical health is compromised. You open yourself up to anxiety. You open yourself up to, blood pressure, kidney, heart disease, all these things that come as a result of stress and anxiety because you're so busy trying to control the people that you lead that you are opening yourself up to be physically harmed. You have to remember as a leader, it is not your job to be God to them. It's not your job to have your word be the gospel. Leading a team, again, for selfish reasons, puts self at the top of the ladder and disregards everyone else. And so now you wonder why you're stressed or why you're overwhelmed. It's because self is on the throne. And the people who are there to help you and to help advance the vision and the mission of your work culture are beneath you in your eyes. And yet some of those people are the ones who are keeping things afloat. The second reason why leadership and low self-esteem don't mix, they're like oil and literal water. is because leaders with low self-esteem miss out on opportunities to hire, to keep, and to retain over time great talent. And I have in parentheses here the overwhelming principle. That is when you become so overwhelmed, or you overwhelm those that have great talent to make up for those who are not pulling their weight. A leader with low self esteem will often identify, and this is not a good behavior, by the way, they will often identify favorites. They will often identify individuals with whom they can identify because this person is on time, they're committed, they're dedicated, they finish their projects on time. They're like clockwork. You can depend on them. But what happens is a leader with low self-esteem will either come to rely on that person very heavily or will become jealous of that person because the person is talented and risk losing that person. Because when you overwhelm a talented person, pretty soon they're going to get lost in the process and they might potentially want to leave and move on. Some of you may be able to identify with this if you have or you work with, you have a coworker who's super talented, they're, super professional, they're always on time, their projects are always done, their work is always excellent. Pretty soon, leaders with low self-esteem will begin to dump more and more and more on those individuals because they feel that those individuals can handle it. And sometimes because those individuals make them look good. And who doesn't want an employee that makes you look good? You absolutely want that. But you have to be careful because then a leader with low self-esteem operating in passive aggressive behaviors will then turn on that employee that has great talent, become jealous of them, and begin to berate them or belittle them in the workplace. And so this is something you have to be really careful of as you are trying to grow your leadership skills, as you want to become somebody who's effective in leadership. You have to balance how you treat all of your staff. You should not have favorites. And even if in your heart there's somebody that you favor over another, your staff should never know it. They should never see it. They should never even perceive it. Because as a leader, your job is to treat all of your staff with respect, even though you are treating them according to their personality. So you're not exactly treating them all exactly the same, but you're also not doing anything that would have a hint or a smell or a fragrance of favoritism in any way, shape, or form. So we've talked about low self-esteem. We've talked about the characteristics of low self-esteem. We've talked about how leaders with low self-esteem impact the workplace and how that impact can cause a toxic work culture, and it could cause people to not be happy, not be productive, and not be their best selves. And that is not a good space for growth within your organization. If you want your organization, your company to grow, if you want things to be on a positive track, leaders have to guard themselves against being leaders that function from a place of poor self-image and a lack of confidence. So how do you become a leader with high self-esteem? How do you become a leader that has confidence, not arrogance? They're different. Confidence, belief in yourself, and self-respect. How do you become that leader? Well, first of all, you have to be guided by the principles of honesty and integrity. Honesty and integrity. If you're the type of leader that cannot be trusted, your word is not your bond, you say one thing, you do another, you lie, you cheat, you steal, and people see these things. These are not things that are hidden in the dark. Everything that's in the dark comes to the light. And so if you're not guided by honesty and integrity, very quickly people will learn that they can't trust you and they can't trust your leadership. And if they can't trust your leadership, they will not follow you, not wholeheartedly. This is where you have people who get into the space where maybe they liked coming to work, they liked their job, but now because they see that you're not trustworthy, They begin to just come to work, do the bare minimum to get by, get their check, and go home. So, as a leader with high self esteem, you are guided by, you live by, you work to the best of your ability in honesty and integrity. The second thing is you have to be willing to admit that you are not perfect. No leader, no matter how great you are, no matter how wonderful you are, how smart you are, how educated you are, how experienced you are, is without error or without mistakes. So you have to be willing to admit when you do something wrong. When you see leaders with low self esteem that are often accusatory of everyone around them, but never take responsibility, that's a tall tale sign that this leader is not confident in who they are. They're not confident in their own ability. A leader that's not confident will never admit to error, will never admit mistake. They will always find somebody to be a scapegoat, a staff person, usually who's too weak, or who just feels, I don't want to speak up for myself. Generationally, there are differences in staffing, and we see this more clearly now as we're looking at Generation Y, Generation X, Generation Z. Um, the people who were, born the baby boomers and then the silent generation, their concept of work was you go to work, you put your head down, you do what you have to do, you work your 30 or 40 years at one company, you get your retirement, boom, you live your life, you take care of your family, life is great. Some of us that are, more from the Gen Xers generation are more concerned about work-life balance, or more concerned about, yes, I'm not just going to up and quit a job. I will find another job before I leave one, but still kind of have that committed, I'll hang in there. Even if the boss is not doing what they're supposed to do, I'll try to make it work until I can't make it work anymore. But our younger generations are very much more willing to walk off a job, to leave, to not commit to years and years of the same thing. In fact, most of the data shows that younger generations will work an average of one job, an average of 3 to 5 years. That's it. They're moving on. And that's on the high side. And so when they see a leader who seems inauthentic, who's not willing to admit that I make mistakes, that I did something wrong, but is always placing blame, again, you will begin to experience high turnover. And so it's important as a leader who believes in yourself, who's confident in yourself and has self-respect, that you say, I don't always get it right. And that's okay, because you're also letting your staff know they're going to make mistakes too. But you don't want them to lie about it. You want them to own up to it. And that's what a high self-esteem environment looks like. People making mistakes, owning up to the mistake, saying, you know what, yep, I did that wrong, but I'm going to fix it moving forward. Not, I did it wrong, and so now I have to hide because I know if I don't, I'm going to catch your wrath. Here's another one that's very, very important for leaders with high self-esteem. You have to be willing to read, study, and then repeat. Read, study, and repeat. No leader, no matter how long you've been in leadership, no matter how long you've been in your particular field, you don't know it all. You have to be willing to get better. And the way that you get better is you read, you study, you look at mentors, you find people who have done what you're doing and are doing it better, and you continue to try to improve yourself. Reading and studying helps you to understand how to be better. I found so many resources on LinkedIn, on Forbes.com. You can even go on your computer and just Google leadership, best practices for leaders, how to lead difficult teams. All these things are important for you to learn, because a leader with high self-esteem is confident not because they're a know-it-all, but because they're steadily improving themselves. They're steadily getting better at their craft. And so read, study, and repeat. Next, celebrate the skills and success of others. Leaders with high self-esteem have no need to belittle others. They have no need to compare or to be jealous of others. If somebody on their team is amazing at communications, They celebrate that and build on that. Why? Because again, if your team does well, it makes you as the leader look great. It makes the company do well. It's really uh it's really a bad place to be in when you're jealous of the people that are working with you and around you. If you have great people on your team, celebrate that. I've heard different people say down through the years, well, I have to be careful because I don't want this person to take your job. But here's a little hint. You should always be training someone to be able to take over in your absence. God forbid something happens or you have to be off for an extended period of time, there should be somebody on your team that can very easily step in and fulfill your duties. Because guess what? If you make room for them, somebody higher than you has to make room for you, because as you're building the skills and success of others, your skills are being built as a leader. And so you make yourself marketable, not less marketable. So that fear about, oh, so and so is going to take my job. Well, guess what? If a door closes for you, that means a door is going to open somewhere else. And you have to always look at it that way. You always have to be an optimist as a leader, not always looking at the glass as half empty, but it's half full. Saying to yourself, I'm going to celebrate my team. I'm going to find out who does well at what, and I'm going to build on that skill. So, a practical example is I had a team member who some people would call a chatty Cathy. She liked to talk. And I said, well, why wouldn't we use that for the good of the company? So make her the person that's over external communications. Allow her to be the person that does the outreach because she likes to talk. She likes to interact. She's very extroverted. So instead of treating her extroversion as a deficit, put her to work. Give her opportunities to talk to people, to reach out to people. She's great at building relationships. Look at it that way instead of making it a deficit. And so that's a practical example of how you can take someone on your team who's skilled at a particular thing, build on that skill, and celebrate that success. How many leaders out there are working with people and don't know their team? This is a sad, sad, sad commentary. If you're a leader and you have somebody on your team who is an engineer and you have an engineering problem and you don't know it, shame on you. If you're looking for somebody to build a spreadsheet and you have a spreadsheet wizard on your team and you don't know it, shame on you. If you're looking for somebody to have empathy with your clients and customers, and there's somebody on your team who's an empath and you have no clue, shame on you. You can be cordial. You can be investigative with your staff. You can learn all kinds of stuff about them without getting super personal. And that's a skill that comes from just walking around, getting to know your staff, learning about the things that are important to them. And we'll get into that a little bit more in our third session on knowing your team. But I just wanted to spend a little bit of time there to say that a leader with high self-esteem, who's confident and believes in themselves, will celebrate the skills and the success of others. Here's another one: be flexible. A leader with high self-esteem is flexible. Inflexible people, people who aren't willing to budge on their viewpoint, on their thought process, even on the way something is done, lacks confidence in their ability to make changes. A lot of times, some of the best changes that you will make in your department, in your unit, in your team, comes from one of your staff, because they do the job, they're doing the hands-on, so they have a better understanding of the day-to-day. And so if you're flexible and allow change to happen, sometimes those changes can make everybody's life easier. They can save you money, they can save you time and energy. So as a leader, be confident enough in yourself, know yourself well enough to know, yes, I'm amazing, but I don't have it all together. So let me be flexible. Here's another one: be friendly, but not necessarily friends with your staff. Leaders with low self-esteem have the need to constantly be validated. to constantly feel like someone is putting them on a pedestal. What this does is it creates inappropriate friendships or relationships within the workplace. I'm sure you've seen it. I've definitely seen it. I've worked in places where supervisors and staff were besties or buddies. And I mean, they're friends on social media. They go hang out together, they go out drinking together. They're just best buds. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't situations where maybe you were promoted from amongst your peers and now somebody that you were friends with, now you have to supervise them. That does, in fact, happen. But there are also circumstances where a leader with low self esteem is seeking validation, is seeking likes, is seeking attention. And so this person will go beyond being friendly to being friends with their staff. So now that complicates things because when you're friends with your staff and your besties and your buddies, when you have to correct an issue or when you may have to reprimand a staff member that you're quote unquote friends with, that creates an issue. Well, I thought we were girls. Well, I thought you was my boy. Well, I thought, we were just hanging out last night. We were just, drinking last night. We were just, and even in terms of information that's being shared that should not be shared. Because as a leader, there's many, many issues that you will have to keep confidential. And as smooth and as sexy and as comfortable as gossip is, it cannot be named among leaders. Because once you start sharing information that your team and your staff should not be privy to, now you have contributed to the office gossip mill. Now there is stuff that staff should not be aware of that they can take and use against you or against the company. There's information that is confidential, specific to a person related to their protected health information, protected to their privacy, all those kinds of things. And so being friendly is different than being friends. Being friendly means I can ask questions, I can learn, I can talk about, hey, how's your mom? How are the kids? How was graduation? But being friends now crosses another line. And so leaders with high self esteem, with confidence, with self respect are willing to put a separation between friendship and friendliness. And that is very key. So many supervisors, especially new supervisors, fall into the trap of wanting everyone to like them, not realizing that your position is not about being liked. It is about getting the job done and doing it in a professional manner. Here's my personal soapbox, if you will. Leaders with high self-esteem know how to balance people and paper. I call it people and paper management. The reason why this is so important to me is because I am an empath. I am a person who kind of cares about, nurtures, mothers, everybody. And as a leader, that can be a deficit to be a full-time nurturer. There's such a thing as understanding your team, working with people, caring about people, wanting to do what's best for people, but also making sure that the work gets done. So a manager should neither be all paper or all people. You have to balance that. You can care about people, you can make accommodations for people, but you also have to manage that paper. You have to make sure that that work gets done and that it's done excellently and professionally. So you have to walk that fine line of demonstrating that you care about your staff, but also that you want their work to be excellent. That comes from building expectation. When you have your one-on-one meetings, when you have your monthly meetings, when you have your small group meetings, Always communicating your expectations, letting your staff know, I care about you. How do you do that? You ask for their opinion. You ask for their buy-in. You ask for, well, what do you think about this? How do you think we should tackle this project? How do you think we should tackle this process? That lets them know that you care. But at the end of the day, there are some times when they don't get to have that buy-in because of a demand from higher up or a demand from the company. And so what you say to your staff in those cases is, listen, we have this project that we have to do, and this is the way that we have to do it. Now, how we divide up the work, we can make that decision amongst ourselves, but this is the deadline and this is what we have to do. And I am excited because I know that you're the team to pull it off. So you're encouraging your staff, but you're balancing that thing of the paper and the people. You're not all paper, work, 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 or all people, 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 and then neglecting the job on both ends. So that's very, very, very important. A leader with high self-esteem is a great communicator. Great communicators let you know within reason what's going on. They are open, they are honest, their door is open, and they don't fear negative confrontation. There are times as a leader when you have to address situations that are not so comfortable. But one of the things that my husband said to me that has literally transformed my leadership was, whenever you have to reprimand someone or correct a situation, put yourself in the chair of the person who's being corrected. Then think about how you want your supervisor to speak to you about that situation. So, Trishonda, you're in the chair and your supervisor is telling you something you don't want to hear or something that's difficult to address. How do you want your supervisor to address you? Well, in that same way, that's how you address your staff. So communication is sharing things in an honest and an open way, making sure people are informed, making sure people are clear and understand the assignment, but not sending 10 and 20 and 30 emails about the same topic, not CCing 15, 20 people in the organization about something that only impacts one or two people. That's not great communication. Great communication is having one-on-ones with your staff, communicating your expectations, offering praise for the things that they're doing well, and offering suggestions for things that need to improve. And a leader with high self-esteem can do this without belittling, degrading, patronizing, or making their staff person feel less than. Train your staff, trust your staff, and provide good feedback. Train your staff, trust your staff, and provide good feedback. When you have provided excellent direction, excellent instructions, and you have then entrusted responsibility to them, you don't just drop the ball and run away. You train them, you trust them, you monitor, not over their shoulder, but behind the scenes. And then you turn around again in your one-on-one meetings and you provide good feedback. You share, I noticed that, you handled that situation with that client very greatly the other day. I'm so proud. Here's something else that I would like you to work on. So train them very well, be very clear in your expectation, trust them, and provide feedback. A leader with high self-esteem will not micromanage or stand over the shoulder of their staff, but they will provide a ton of training, a good amount of trust, and excellent feedback. Take an interest in your team's interest without getting too personal. We kind of touched on this earlier, that you can, ask your team, hey, how are the kids? How was the game? How was graduation? What are you doing for your birthday? But not getting in their personal business. Remember, you always want to refer your staff to your company's employee assistance program if they need counseling or, to any counseling resources that your job may have. You don't want to get too invested in your staff's personal lives, because then what happens is everything that you now become accountable for. All the information that you possess, you now have to live with that information. And it may come to a situation where the person said, "Oh, I shared something with my supervisor." Meanwhile, they shared it with 10 other people on the floor. But once it gets out, they're automatically going to accuse their supervisor of being the one that shared it. So again, the only personal information that they should be sharing with you are things that directly impact their ability to do the job that is on their job description. And even in those circumstances, there are some things that they should just be sharing with human resources. And so you have to be careful about personal information. If your staff does share personal information with you, you want to make sure you're keeping good documentation. And you definitely want to hang in for our next session next Wednesday at 7 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking specifically about documentation and how you can do discipline and documentation. Documentation is not always for discipline, it's also for good things. But again, if somebody shares personal information with you, you want to keep good documentation. And you also want to seek the guidance and the direction of your human resources department. Follow your employee handbook. It's very, very important as a supervisor that you know your employee handbook. And we'll touch on that again as we do documentation, because it's important that you know what you're accountable for and what your team is accountable for. And so a leader with high self-esteem takes an interest in their team, but doesn't get personal. See, that's where that friendship stuff enters in again. Again, be friendly, but not friends. Model the behaviors that you want to see in your team. As a leader, what do you want your team to do? You want them to come to work on time. You want them to leave on time. You want them to take the right amount of time for their break. You want their work to be turned in on time. You want their work to be excellent and free of errors. Those are the types of behaviors you want to see in your team. Okay, leader, make sure that you're modeling those behaviors for your team. Don't ask them to do things that you yourself are not willing to do. Because a leader with low self-esteem says, "Do what I said," or "because I said so," not because I'm doing it. A leader with high self-esteem says, "I'm going to show you the way, and then I expect you to follow." Correct when necessary and do it with respect. Do not leave bad behavior unchecked. A leader with low self-esteem, remember again, we said people with low self-esteem struggle with passive aggressive behavior, meaning they'll let something go, they'll let it slide, they'll keep pushing it under the rug, and then one day they'll just blow, they'll just snap out. You cannot correct bad behavior in that manner. You have to correct things as they occur. If you have a staff person who's consistently late, you have to document the lateness. Some people have a 2 strikes, some people have a 3 strikes before they do a write-up. But the first couple of times you notice your person is late and that's impacting your workflow, your workplace, you call them in. You have a verbal conversation. You also document that conversation. But you have that conversation to say, "Hey, I noticed on this date you were 5 minutes late. On this date you were 10 minutes late. Our policy is that you report on time for your shift according to the handbook. Reference the page number, reference the paragraph, and let them know, according to our handbook, this is what it says. Now, if this happens today, I'm giving you a verbal warning. If this happens again, we're going to have to take you to a written warning. And I don't want to do that. So I want to make sure that you're getting here on time. If there's an issue that's prohibiting you from getting to work on time, let's talk about that. Are you dealing with a situation with transportation? Are you dealing with a situation where, you're dropping a child off at school or something of that nature? So find out what's going on. Don't just jump into accusatory mode. Find out, does the person maybe need to work a later shift or an earlier shift? Try to work with them as much as you can within company policy. But whenever you have to correct the situation, always do it with respect. Again, put yourself in the chair of the person who's being corrected and think about how you would want your supervisor to speak to you. Ask for help when needed. Leaders with high self-esteem have no problem asking for help. Remember, high self-esteem doesn't mean you're a know-it-all or you have it all together. It means that you're confident enough in your own self. You have enough self-respect to say, you know what? I don't know the answer. Let me ask for help. The worst type of leader is somebody who pretends like they know all the answers all the time, instead of saying, I don't know. Let me check and find out. Ask for help. If you need a mentor, ask for help. If you need a therapist, ask for help. If you need to go to get a pedicure, ask for help. Whatever help it is that you need, be willing to ask for it. That will help you to avoid becoming this leader with low self-esteem who always has to be validated, who always has to be on top, who always has to be right, even though they're dead wrong. Here are some resources that I want to share with you. There's a book called Empty Your Cup by Young Kang Chan, and it's a great read on how to change your perception of yourself. Again, remember we said read, study, and repeat. So if you are trying to figure this low self-esteem thing out, how to empty yourself of your own perception of yourself and learn how to perceive yourself properly, this is a great book. You can get it on Amazon.com. Again, LinkedIn, Forbes.com, tons of articles about leadership. There's another book by Joshua Jarvis. You can also get this one on Amazon.com. It's called The Kingdom Driven Leader. Now, this one is a little longer read, but from successful endeavors to a significant mission. This is a great book if you want to learn how to be mission driven, not selfish. Remember, we talked about low self-esteem produces selfish leaders. And when you're selfish, you're setting yourself up for failure. But when you are making an effort to make a difference, that is when you become a mission driven leader. And so you want to try to check out this book by Joshua Jarvis called The Kingdom Driven Leader. Now, I just have to tell you, I am a Christian. I am a believer of Jesus Christ. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I do believe that the Bible is the inspired and infallible word of God. And so I do read the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is probably one of my favorite books in the Bible. There's a lot of wisdom in there. If you get a Bible, try to get the New Living Translation or even the Message Bible. Those are easier reads than some of the older like King James and NIV versions. But the idea is it's a book of wisdom, and it just teaches you wisdom around a bunch of different topics. And leadership is addressed in several passages in the Bible. And in just a second, we'll look at one. But I just want to encourage you, read the book of Proverbs. Get the New Living Translation. You can even download the YouVersion app on your phone, and you can read some information about what does it mean. The book of Proverbs was written by King Solomon. King Solomon was the son of King David. And King Solomon's prayer to God was, Lord, give me wisdom of how to go in and out before your people. Give me wisdom of how to lead. And so Solomon was not only the wisest leader, but he was one of the best leaders because he got his wisdom directly from God. Here's a quote by John C. Maxwell. John C. Maxwell is a trainer, a minister. He has all this experience in leadership. And this is one of the best quotes that he came up with about leadership. He says, leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It is about one life influencing another. Leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It is about one life influencing another. So if you can be a positive influencer, not just so you can make your own name great, but if you can make a difference, you can be an excellent leader. And then I want to leave you with this passage from Proverbs 29:2. When the godly are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked are in power, they groan. When godly people lead, when godly people rule, people rejoice. Now you might think, man, wicked, that's a strong word. Wickedness, man. I don't think of a leader with low self-esteem as being wicked. But often a leader with low self-esteem will end up having wicked behaviors that belittle, demean, degrade, hurt their staff, and create a toxic work culture. So who do you want to be? Do you want to be a righteous leader, or do you want to be a wicked leader? I don't know about you, but experience has taught me that I want to be a righteous leader. I want to be the type of leader that people can look up to. I want to be the type of leader that inspires people, the type of leader that people can model after. And I believe the best way to be that type of leader is to take your instructions from the best leader of all, and that's Jesus Christ. I hope I've said something today to encourage you. I pray that you've gotten something good out of the information that I've shared today. And I do pray that you will go back and watch the replay if you haven't had a chance to take notes. Share this with your friends, your followers. Let them know we're going to be doing sessions every Wednesday starting this week. Not every Wednesday, but just for a few weeks, we're going to be spending some time talking about leadership. And so next week, we're going to be dealing with documentation and discipline. Documentation and discipline. So documentation and discipline, and then we're going to culminate the following Wednesday with knowing your team. How do you know your team? If you have questions, if you just have some things that you're struggling with, or you say, you know what, I want to be a leader, I want to be an effective leader, please drop me an email at encouragedproductions@gmail.com. Again, that's encouragedproductions, all one word, all lowercase, @gmail.com. And I'll be glad to answer any questions for you that I can. God bless you, everybody, and have a great evening.